in relation to the absence of KESA, and I'm satisfied that based on those factors that there's no significant risk to the fund.
Okay, right. Hopefully we don't have to return to that. Thank you.
Okay, and with that comment, is that item approved? Moving on, please, Veronica.
So we now move to item 5, Pension Administration Performance, Quarterly Update to 30th of September 2024.
Please go as it says, quarterly report providing information on the operational performance of pension administration. I'm not seeing any comments or no. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. It's not directly related to the performance. It's about the regulatory updates at the end. And I'm just wondering, there's a comment about the Chancellor looking to pension boards to fire up the economy. Has there been any kind of communication through the Scheme Advisory Board or any kind of comments about forced consolidation? Because I know that's something that the Chancellor is quite keen on, is creating larger funds. And obviously, our fund performs exemplary. So I'm just wondering, has there been any communications along these lines?
I thought this was just related to England and Wales, but Stuart, is that something you can, or Paul?
Yeah, happy to take the question, Bailey. So, as you say, the merging of the funds is an issue in relation to England and Wales just now. There haven't been any specific calls in relation to our own fund at this stage. The information that's attached to the report is really just a broad indication of a range of factors in terms of that's having an influence over regulatory matters.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, you seem to spark someone off. So I've got Kenny and then Bill and then George. So Kenny first, please.
Yeah, forgive me if, but I couldn't see it in the minutes, but I'm sure Arthur raised a point at the last meeting about the statutory indicators, because the report at the moment shows how many cases were out with statute at the end of the quarter, but there may be other instances within the quarter where we haven't achieved the statutory. So I think there's talk about getting the indicator to show how many cases went out with statute as a number rather than just outstanding at the end of the quarter. Apologies if I couldn't see it in the minutes what the answer was.
Yes. Paul?
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Kenny. So I can confirm that we've adjusted the presentation within the report just to be absolutely clear that these figures are in relation to the end of the quarter. We are currently reviewing the format in relation to what you mentioned, and happy to report back on that in due course. But for the time being, we'll continue to report on the basis that we have done, which is the number of cases at the end of each quarter.
Hear that, Kenny? Silence is agreement. So Bill and then George and then a couple of others. So Bill, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, this is a slightly operational question, but I think it was maybe the suitable place to bring it in the agenda. I was asked by somebody who is shortly going to retire from working in the Angus Council, and they were a bit surprised to hear that they were going to leave, let's say, at the end of January, but their pension wouldn't be paid for several months after that. Is that normal practice? Because that surprised me a little bit. I mean, clearly, if somebody was, didn't have savings or whatever, that could put them in a difficult position. Just to sort of, what's the normal turnaround time we would expect to pay a pension after someone retires?
Paul?
Yeah. So my understanding is that there is a requirement from the date that the individual's employer notifies us of the information that we would have 60 days from that point of view to make the payment of the pension. Can I just confirm with Amanda, am I correct that that's the right target?
Yes, 60 days for issue the pension options out, and then once all the completed forms are back, then we would be looking to progress for the next pension payroll.
So is that effectively means there's a 2-month gap as a minimum before anyone would get their pension?
We do try and get them out as quickly. That's the statutory 60 days. There are
Right.
varying factors, yeah, where a member can complete their forms if they've requested an estimate prior to the retirement date. But if we've had no contact from the member prior, then yeah, the 60 days would be the maximum amount of time it would take to get the pension options out to the member.
Right, okay, that's fine. But thanks for clarifying that. Thank you.
Okay, I've got George, and then we'll go on to Arthur and Stuart. George first, please.
Yeah, there was a part that says there's an employer having problems with paying. Has that been sorted yet, or is that still an ongoing issue?
So, as outlined in the report, that continued to be an issue for the current quarter, and we'll provide an update in the following quarter in terms of any progress in terms of a change on that.
And are they working with you though? That's the problem.
Absolutely. We're working closely with all employers in the fund, so it's just that that's the latest position as it's included in the report. Apologies, George.
Okay, Arthur next.
Yeah, just a couple of things. One was just some cropped up there. The figure for pensions into payment. Well, firstly, I will say I did get a response from Paul, I think, about the change to the tables to reflect more clearly what the position is now. So I think I did get a response about that. Although I think, like Kenny says, well, we're looking to see if we could get a figure for the numbers of cases that went beyond statute, and that'd be quite handy to see, either as a percentage or as an absolute figure, whichever. But as you say, that's work in progress, so fine. Yeah, and on the pensions and the payment figure, I was just going to say that. Does that include the period? Because there is that period. Because I'm always advising members when we're trying to advise them on who are going into pension or perhaps because of ill health or whatever, there's a period where it's in their hands to some extent because they've got to make a decision about commutation, and they'll be given the two quotes, one with the maximum commutation, one with no commutation, and asked to kind of pick a figure in between kind of thing, and that obviously that can take some time if members aren't prepared for that to be turned around. I don't know if that contributes to the figures of the pensions into payment. And if so, we can understand that can be a problem, and maybe is there a need there for guidance in terms of making members aware when they're coming up for retirement that decision is in their hands and that can take time and delaying their pension going into payment if they take a while to decide over the options they're given. That makes sense?
It does.
Me, but Paul, if you can try and answer that.
I mean, we can certainly look at the communication in terms of or the correspondence that's issued in relation to that, Arthur. Ultimately, though, it is a decision for the individual to take in terms of what suits their own circumstances. But, it goes without saying that the longer they take the time to make that decision, it will have an impact on our ability to finalise it. So, but happy to look at that, Arthur, separately.
Yeah, the other point I was going to make was just picking up on somebody mentioned again about our fund doing particularly well. And I was just saying, I was aware, because I was going to raise this in a later part of the agenda when we're looking at performance of the funds, that I saw, just because I've just nearly been, I'm now on the SAB in a unison capacity, and there was a report that was kicking about from earlier in the year from, I think, Hyman Robertson's, looking at the relative performance of the funds, and it was given like a 2020 figure and a 2023 figure. Now, I don't know if we maybe hadn't been able to reply in time with the 2023 figure, but it showed Tayside Fund with no real increase between 2020 and 2023. So it now shows, so that in that chart we looked like we were the worst in terms of percentage funding across the Scottish fund. So I don't know if that's just because we were missing the 2023 data or whether it is. It seems to be that it's sitting about 110, which is the figure I think we're saying we're funded at. So I can't quite remember going back to 2020 whether we were still at that position then. But if that is the case, we do seem to be significantly behind. Obviously, we don't know what the other funds are doing in terms of what the risk profile of their investment is, and obviously taking account about whether or not we've got good, a low contribution rate, which obviously is a significant element. That was just what people keep saying, we're one of the best funded. those figures didn't seem to show that in terms of Scotland. I was just wondering if we could clarify that.
So I can, excuse me. So I can probably help with a bit on that if it's helpful, Paul. So I think in terms of the fund, the assets have performed strongly relative to others, but the way the actuaries measure the liabilities for each of the funds is different. So I think a number of the Scottish funds have got Hymans Robertson as scheme actuary, who measure the liabilities in a different way to your scheme actuary. So part of the reason the funding level isn't moving is more to do with the liability valuation than the assets. So yeah, sorry, it's probably not I haven't seen the report, but it's probably not an apples to apples comparison, unfortunately.
Okay, now, let's see, Stuart, but he's got his hand down. So Kevin.
Okay, just really asking that the officers keep informed on any pension scheme changes that happens down south, because it's always been a call from Scottish ministers that it would be good to fire up the economy. So I think it's something that we as a pension board would agree with. We would like to have seen in investment in housing and the like across our local areas. So, you know, I think it'd be good if we were kept informed. Obviously conscious that Unison made the call for the pension schemes to merge in Scotland quite a time ago. You know, so I don't suppose it's something that's disappeared entirely off the radar.
Certainly happy to give that assurance, Bailey Keenan, and provide that information as it becomes available.
Okay, and Stuart.
Thanks. Right, I mentioned a little while ago Fire Scotland, and they're consolidating out of their existing positions in the 8 Scottish local government pension schemes into that of Strathclyde. Can I just ask, in terms of ourselves, of assets under management, funds under management, how much of an impact does that have? One would anticipate it's not absolutely huge, but it still will have an impact. And secondly, going back to what Stephen Rowan was saying earlier, I just want to clarify, Paul, what you're saying is if there was any move to consolidate the 8 local government pension schemes in Scotland, that would not be a matter for the UK government or the Treasury. It would come under the Scottish government. Is that right or wrong?
Hey, Paul.
Yeah, so I would just have to absolutely check that first for you, Councillor Donovan. So if you wouldn't mind, I'm happy to come back to yourself and other board members and provide that clarification.
I think that's quite an important matter because one can see the potential direction of travel here. So it's something I think we certainly got to keep on top of. And the other one is on Fire Scotland, just to ask there.
Yeah.
If I could pick up on Fire Scotland, Councillor Donaldson. So, yeah, we're also working with actuaries on that matter, and they base their calculation on the membership details that we hold for all members. So that's an ongoing exercise that's happening also nationwide, and we understand that Hymans will be back in touch with us in due course early next year to provide a value that's anticipated transferring to Strathclyde. At the moment, we don't have that information. We expect to get that early next year.
Okay.
Okay, Kevin, you want to come back in?
Yeah, just I suppose it's another aspect that if we could have officers keep the watchful brief on. I suppose as mergers of local government pension schemes in Scotland came about, it's the sort of different rates that each council would pay that would have been the biggest concern to us as local members. You know, what's paid out to previous employees is one thing, and that'd be set across Scotland. However, the different levels of contribution that we make, I think ours is about 15.7 or something, many more's are up in the 20-odd%. So that merger of funds will, you know, be something worth watching.
It would if it was on the agenda, but I don't see it on the Scottish agenda at this point in time. But Arthur, to you, and you'll be the last question on.
Just to confirm that I think Unison's policy is still that we see merit in the consolidation of funds in terms of economies of scale and improving funding costs, costs, transactional costs, etc. with investments, but we'll continue to kind of look at that from a perspective of we do see the benefits of potential benefits of it. Of course, that depends on the nature of how that consolidation is done, and there are obviously going to be queries about what the pros and cons are for different funds in terms of their profiles, etc. In terms of bringing them together. But yeah, I thought from what was being said with the UK government, it would open the door, but the Scottish government I think would still have a view on what solution they took, depending on what options were available. I don't think that would be a purely Westminster decision.
That was certainly my understanding as well. So with that, can we agree item 5, was that? Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay, moving on please, Veronica.
So we now move to item 6, Treasury Management Activity 24 to 25 Mid-Year Review. This report is for noting.
Standard report for the last 6 months, or 6 months to the end of September anyway. Not seeing any indication of questions, so I'm taking that as agreement. Okay.
So we now go to item 7, proposed timetable of meetings for 2025. This report is for your approval.
Self-explanatory, and not really the sort of thing that should be debated at a committee meeting. That would be very complicated. I'm going to just assume that's agreed.
Thank you. I'll now stop recording the meeting because we move to the confidential part of the agenda, and I would also ask that any members of press or public